The world was at peace. Nations flourished and kingdoms grew. A nation known as Trilthia was at the center of power, with no enemy that could match it. Humans and mages walked amongst each other as equals. It was a time of peace until that night. I can still see it in my head.
This can't go on.
Legend says that the citizen shattered the crystal orb, and once the light faded, neither he nor the demon from that night were ever seen again.
Special thanks to all the people who animated the bosses, textures, and amazing terrain for this video. It's going to be crazy. Special thanks to Arts by Kev and Toxic for the crazy work they put into it. Let's begin an adventure like nothing before. As I began to wake up, I started to look around, only to realize this was not familiar. There was blue fire on the ground in front of me, and also a strange object that looked like a shield. Behind me, another object I had not seen before. But my biggest scare was yet to come, as I looked up and realized there were planets all around me. This was not Earth, but I had no time to dilly-dally, so I began to run. I knew there would be a lot of hostile creatures here at night, as every other alternate planet seems to have that, so I needed to find some sort of shelter and resources as quickly as I could. Otherwise, I would be eaten before I could even starve. As morning broke, I could see a shack in the distance, so I began to move towards it. I had no idea if there was anything hostile inside, but it was my best bet to begin foraging for food. As I opened the door, nothing met me, and I breathed a sigh of relief. I began opening the chests, and inside, to my luck, there was food. I continued looting the house, finding some basic armor and some basic tools. This would have helped me out at least a little bit. I left the house, not knowing where I was going, just trying to find some sense of where I was. But as I began to wander, I heard a noise behind the house and I went towards it. A strange mammoth-like creature. What the heck even is that? It looks like a hybrid T-Rex with a rocket launcher on it. I have no idea, but I do not want it, so I sprinted as fast as I could. While I was running for my life, some sort of wizard began casting a spell on me. It was the blue fire again, but I had no time to see what it was. I had to keep running, as now a rhinoceros was chasing me as well, or some type of animal that looked like a rhinoceros. My only goal now was to find some body of water to try and escape these land animals. Thankfully, there was a lake nearby, and I dove right in. I looked back, only to see in my amazement these giant creatures. They somewhat resemble a rhinoceros and a T-Rex, but they looked like they were more advanced. This would be something I'd have to figure out later. For now, it was all about survival. While I was wandering, I found a village, but this was no ordinary village. There was no villagers around, and the village was much smaller, but it had upkept paths, but no loot inside of it. It was really strange. I wasn't sure what was going on this planet, but I was going to find out if I wanted to get out of here. Not far from the village, I heard some sort of singing or humming. As I went towards it, I saw a temple that had somehow embedded itself inside of the mountain. As I approached, I realized there was no door, so I made a pickaxe and began mining my way up, until I saw a rhinoceros inside. What on earth? So I sprinted away as fast as I could. I have no idea what this place is, but it seems like any form of human life is gone and replaced with animals for some reason. I had to figure this out later though. Whilst adventuring, I saw something in the water, so I went towards it. It almost looked like a ship, but it was cut in half or something. I began to investigate around to where I found some chests with some basic loot inside. But what concerned me the most was how the ship was wrecked. It was literally perfectly cut in half. What could have done something like that? I stayed up late the first night. I wanted to see the sky light up to get a better bearing on where I was and to see if I could possibly see Earth. But as it got darker, I only grew more concerned as more planets began appearing. None of them looked like Earth. Was I even on a planet, or was I in the same solar system? I have no idea. As the next day approached, I bumped into what looked like a giraffe, which was a nice reminder of home, until I looked up in the sky and I saw some flying platypus-like object. I have no idea what that is, but I'm certainly not going near it. I bumped into a villager that day, which was my first form of human contact. When I right-clicked on him, he offered to give me a blue journal. I don't know what his task in this world is, but I couldn't afford to give him anything to get the guide, so I let him be for now, but I would definitely have to come back and check this out later. While on the side of the cliff, I noticed something in the water that looked like a tower, so I jumped in and I went towards it. However, as I got closer, I saw it. There was a pillager banner. I was slightly scared, but I decided I would see if I could fight off the pillagers that were there. However, when I got closer, there was no pillagers to be found. I went all the way to the top, looting the chests as I went. Most of them just had some basic supplies, nothing too crazy, but I could see in the distance a mansion. What on earth was a mansion doing in the middle of a lake? And why was this tower not guarded? This was not adding up. But next to the tower, I saw some sort of entrance to a mineshaft, so I went towards it. I cautiously made my way down the mineshaft, not knowing what to expect. When I got to the bottom, I saw a spawner and I quickly broke it. Next to the spawner was a chest, and when I opened it, I got some better loot. I continued exploring the dungeon, only to find this open area over a lava pit with pillars emerging. It almost seemed like the world was decaying. But I began to continue looking around to where I found a room filled with skulls, but chests inside as well. I looted the chests and found some enchanted books and some other weaponry. This would be a great advantage. As I was about to go up a staircase, I noticed a small creature. When I right-clicked on him, he was willing to trade me, but he was going to trade me things that you could not get inside of Minecraft, like Fortune 5. I wasn't sure what kind of entity this was that could trade me such powerful items, but I didn't have anything to trade him, so I let him be for now, but I would definitely keep that in the back of my head that we could get this crazy of gear. I noticed the mineshaft led to some large cavern, so I went inside. On the ground, I saw some sort of bush, so I went towards it and tried to hit it, and all of a sudden, a ginormous fish came out that could swallow me whole. I turned and I sprinted away. I met a skeleton in a corridor, and I almost went back, but then I realized, giant fish, skeleton. So I attacked the skeleton. Whilst I was in the cave, I mined some basic resources. I found some coal and some iron, but I didn't want to spend too much time mining yet. This world had so much to explore, and I'd only just touched the surface. The next day, I spent a lot of time traveling and sightseeing what was around. I was trying to figure out if I wanted to make a base in this world or if I could take over one that already existed. I thought the best option for now was to mine and gather some supplies. Looking around, I realized it was beautiful. It was almost like a lush biome, but it was just bigger. Inside, though, was a rhinoceros. He bucked me into the sky, and I had to run away, and I barely survived on 1.5 hearts. This was already crazy. I can't even mine in peace. I began going around, mining up all the iron and coal I could. I saw another one of those bulbs on the ground. There was no way I was going near that thing again. No more giant fish are going to eat me today. I continued looking around, gathering all the supplies I could, gathering some iron and some gold. And then I found it, this giant tortoise. And I really thought to myself, I wonder if I can tame this. I tried right-clicking on it to see if I could potentially ride it and tame it like a horse, but he wasn't having it, so for now, I guess I wasn't going to get a pet turtle. I continued mining for a little while as I wanted to be safe before I headed back up to the surface. I couldn't believe that before the 100 days was over, I was going to have to fight that thing. I found some diamonds though, which was amazing and a nice turn of events to what was going on so far. The next day while I was exploring, I saw this really cool mountainous area. I've always loved the idea of building a mountain base that has bridges going from mountain to mountain and having an interlocking system. And then perhaps we could maybe build a zoo at the bottom with these crazy animals that are in this world. So there was no time to waste. I made my way up the mountainside and I began carving it out. And then I made my way down after putting my supplies away and started gathering some wood. I will need a lot of wood for this design I wanted. As I made my way back up, I began designing the floor. It was going to be simple for now. I was just going to use this wood as a floor and put up some general pillars. But eventually, this was going to be a crazy house. Assuming that thing didn't come and burn it to the ground, which, cross your fingers. I knew that the next step inside of this world was to conquer the main dungeon of the overworld. Once I was able to do that, I could then move on to the next dungeon. And then the one after that, and then, well, if I'm still alive, face Asgard. But I needed to get through the first dungeon first. After finishing up some of the cosmetics on my house, I gathered the last supplies, made a bit more armor, and then I headed out. It was time to find this dungeon. I began searching around, and I found what looked like a Mayan sort of ancient city. I went towards it, and had my sword drawn with my shield out. I went into the first tower that I saw. Inside I found some food, but nothing too crazy, and once again, nobody around. That one villager that wanted to trade me that mysterious adventure book and flint and steel was the only villager I had seen so far, and he didn't seem very normal. But I didn't have much time to waste. I began making my way into the valley, and I searched the other houses, but nothing too valuable was found. While in the forest, I found some sort of structure and I went inside. There wasn't too much in there, it kind of reminded me of a little hobbit hole, but I noticed one of the blocks didn't look right. Sure enough, it was a trap door with a ladder leading down. I went down it without even hesitating, which probably in retrospect wasn't a good idea. When I got to the bottom, there was nothing there but a chest and iron bars with some sort of pillars that had grown inside of them. Why would there be a dungeon below? This doesn't make sense. I gathered the supplies and I quickly made my way up the ladder. I wasn't spending any more time down there than I had to. Later that day I saw a castle. I knew this had to be guarded, so I went towards it ready to fight. But once again, there was nobody there. It made me wonder what this overworld dungeon was going to be if nobody was anywhere. Who was guarding the overworld dungeon? But I didn't let that bother me too much. I gathered the supplies from the abandoned castle, looked around a bit, and then headed out. I found this really cool purple forest. You know, as much as I missed Earth at this point, there's something to admire about these weird planets. Except for everything that wants to eat you, including that giant fish. As I continued my adventure, I found a strange forest, and in the distance I saw it, some sort of giant castle-like object. I thought for sure this one couldn't be abandoned, so I went towards it. And sure enough, it was definitely not abandoned, but by nothing of this world. Undead creatures with status effects, and they had gear, all of them. This was weird. I began to slowly melee the skeleton that ran out at me with a golden axe. I was able to take it down. I then approached back, only to find another one ready to fight. They were spawning from somewhere inside this castle. I had no idea how to get rid of their spawner, but I went closer anyway. I killed the second one and made my way back. I saw them clumped inside, and I noticed on top of a bookshelf a spawner. I managed to pillar through and break the spawner, and in the confusion, they shot each other. A lot of them died, and it made my cleanup a lot easier. I used my crossbow to kill the remaining pillagers. Inside of the first chest, I saw it, a nebula axe. I didn't know how special this item was right now. All I thought was that it was a cool thing, so I grabbed it. Inside of the second chest, enchanted weapons and rare minerals. This was definitely a good start. I grabbed the bookshelves and headed out. It was time to find the dungeon. I didn't want to waste any time on this castle right now. It was finally time to begin my quest to find the Golem of the Underworld. but I had no idea where his dungeon was, so I began adventuring all around looking for it. I knew I could see signs above the earth once I found it. While adventuring through the night, this wraith-like object began spreading that blue fire. Now I knew where it came from the beginning of the game. I began to run, not knowing if I would survive. I found this ruined-like structure, and I ran inside. I then decided to play with the lever and see what it did, and all it did was open the door. I noticed a staircase going down. I was very cautious, but I decided it was the best idea to push forward, as the wraith above ground might kill me. When I got under the ground, I began looking around. It almost looked like a dungeon or a stronghold type of structure. There was no way I found the end portal this quickly, right? I continued down a series of steps until I found an iron golem. This was incredibly strange. I continued pushing forward, breaking through some blocks until eventually I found a villager on a bed. This is why I couldn't find any villagers above the surface. They had moved underground to hide. But what were they hiding from? I continued adventuring in the underground kingdom they had made. This place was really cool. I then found a bell and I proceeded to take it. In one of the villagers' underground homes, I found a smithing table. I decided to take it with me for later so I could make netherite armor when I ended up going to the nether. I continued through the rest of the underground village to see if there was any more loot, and looted all the chests I could find. When I got back to the surface, I saw another one of those giant dinosaurs. I knew there was potential to ride them, but I didn't know what I could tame them with, so for now I pressed on. I had to find the underground golem for my next quest, as he was the boss stopping me from advancing towards the tyrannical dragon. While adventuring though that night, I met some undead mobs inside of the snow biome. While I was dealing with some sort of modded witch, a jaguar came out of nowhere and attacked me. I had no idea these things lived in snow biomes. I sprinted away from my life. With the two of these mobs together, there was no way I would survive. While I ran, all around me were dangerous mobs. I had to keep on moving because if I stopped, they would all catch up to me and get me. This was crazy. After separating the group, I was able to kill them one by one, slowly eliminating all the enemies that had once chased me. The next morning while searching, I found myself running right into the arms of a T-Rex. I quickly turned around and ran away. Or at least it seemed like a T-Rex, I still wasn't sure. The next morning while adventuring, I saw a giant mountain and I knew there had to be something on top. So I began collecting some dirt and then I scaled the side of the mountain. When I finally got to the top, I saw in the corner a small dungeon, and when I went inside, I found a spawner with a chest. There was some decent loot in there, but I had to keep on pushing to find this dungeon. I found myself in the middle of a jungle, and then all of a sudden I was shot. Blindness overcame me. I knew right then and there, this is what I was looking for, but I needed to survive this initial fight. I quickly started to run. What attacked me was called the Forgotten, and they were no easy foe to take down. It was a fierce battle, but I was able to kill it. The Forgotten were the guards of the Underworld Golem. You see, legend tells of a man named Armadeus, who sought out this beast in aims for treasure and riches. Armadeus was a skilled warrior who had won many battles and was known far and wide. One day Armadeus left to conquer the Underworld Golem. But, to this day, legend says that Armadeus was never seen again, whether lost at sea or killed by this mythical creature. No one knows. Now, I knew I was close. I then found it, the Well of Eterna. What this is it allows you to get down to the dungeon levels that the Underworld Golem resides at. This was crazy, but with my armor almost broken, I had to craft some more pieces. I noticed a village nearby, so I went towards it. I looted the houses, and I was able to make a crafting table and craft myself a diamond chestplate and iron leggings. Thankfully, I was also able to find some food inside of the village. This was essential. It was now time to dive down the Well of Eterna and face my fate. After being fully prepared, I went back to the well and I jumped right down. I then lit a torch. as there was only one way to the bottom. When I found it, I dove right down. It was a little eerie going down the tunnel, and when I got to the bottom, a creeper was right there, so I quickly ran back inside. I used the wall as a type of shield, getting some hits in, and then I was able to kill it. My next step into the dungeon, a mini zombie came out. I started attacking it, and I was able to defeat it. Right away, these were not good signs of what was ahead. Eventually, after some searching, I found what I think was the dungeon that held the Underworld Golem. Right away, a skeleton shot me from a distance. I used my crossbows and my bow to take him out. I then began slowly maneuvering my way down the dungeon, as one slip could bring me to the bottom, face to face with the Underworld Golem. Another skeleton approached and I began to shoot him, but he shot me off and I fell to the bottom. I was able to kill him. I quickly gathered my ground and began to look around. There he was. I began to engage right away, and then he hit me, and all of a sudden, we spawned in the middle of what seemed like nowhere, inside of the sky. There I was, on a platform with the Underworld Golem, and the fight began. This battle was one of the toughest ones I'd ever been in. As the battle enraged, I began to shoot him with my crossbow from a distance, but it wasn't doing enough damage, so I started to close in with my axe. But his attacks were crazy, and if I didn't have my shield up, I would surely get destroyed. I kept using the terrain around me to maneuver, but eventually I went back in with my axe and began to smack him some more. His animations were so cool as he began to hit me. I almost forgot I was dying for a moment. I then sprinted away and used the pillars to my advantage. They were great because he was a really big dude and he couldn't fit around them very well. So whenever I got low, all I had to do was sprint to them. But he got me really low at one point, and I had to eat a golden apple to be able to survive. The fight went on for a while, but with combinations of my bow and my axe, I was able to finally take him down. And then, all of a sudden, I found myself falling back into the dungeon. In front of me, a chest. And when I opened it, some sort of netherite-looking armor that was purple. When I hovered over it, I realized it was super good, so I grabbed it out and put it on. This was the loot that he was guarding. But this was only the first of 3. I knew I would have to take on the next 2 bosses if I wanted a chance against this tyrannical dragon, and they were going to be much harder. The Reaper was next, and I had no idea if I was going to be able to kill him. While adventuring back home, I noticed some strange creatures I hadn't seen before. And when I went closer to see if they were hostile, I found out they were definitely hostile. But then, all of a sudden, they started fighting each other in front of me. And I simply waited until one won, and then I killed the other one. Simple enough. But then all of a sudden, a third one came out of nowhere and attacked me. I quickly sprinted towards the water and swam away. When I got to land on the other side, I looked over, and he was walking on water. I have no idea how this is even possible. I waited for him on land and began engaging once again. I swung and used my shield, but he got me super low and I had to be very careful with my hits. I timed them for right after he hit me, and a hit, and one more hit, and I was able to take him down. That was way too close. But as I turned around and looked in front of me, I noticed some sort of Aztec or Inca-like village. And when I went closer, I saw villagers above ground. This was crazy. I had never seen this yet inside of the world. When I looked around, I noticed a hole. I jumped down to investigate it, and when I broke through and dropped in, there was a zombie and a skeleton inside. I was able to kill them both, and as I looked around, I began to realize this was an underground village like the last one I had seen, only the villagers had moved their way back up. They were beginning to take back over the world. But what had changed? Across the lake after leaving the village, I looked around and realized I wanted to build a house here. This was a much cooler terrain than what I had before, so it was time to get to work. It was now time to build the house of the future. I started by terraforming the land a bit to get it a little bit more flat. I then made a farm next to the water, as I thought it would be cool if we could have a giant wheat farm that cascaded all by the sea. I then began the creation of my house. I first put the foundation down using logs. I wanted to sort of mark where the house was going to be. I then got rid of the middle to where the floor was going to be. Once I got rid of all the dirt, I began placing oak logs. This would be the only time I would use any vanilla resources when building this. This build gets so cool, and I'm definitely one of my proudest builds yet. I then began building the walls using the cherry wood. This is from the forest that's right next to us. From there, I began expanding on the pillars. I put a little design next to them. I used upside down stairs, and then I used fences to surround them. I thought this looked really cool. I went around the entire building and made sure each pillar looked the same as the next. I ran out of wood at this point, so I went to the forest that was next to my house and began chopping down some more logs. I wanted to use a dark contrast on the house, and to do this, I was going to use deep slate, but I didn't have any, so I went to the mines and I began collecting some. When I got back, I was pretty much out of food, so I harvested the wheat that I had and made it into some bread. I then began work on the roof. I used the deep slate slabs, and I was going to use two different patterns to sort of look like a more modern architecture. After the house was finished, I went inside and I began lighting it up so no mobs would spawn, but it was far from done. I wanted to add some windows and obviously a door. I began by tearing down some of the walls. I noticed when I was building the roof, the slabs can go two ways. They can go directly flush against any block. This is super cool. So I used deep slate to mark out my windows just to add a little bit of texture. I then gathered some sand and began smelting it down into glass. I used the deep slate around my door to accent it a little more, and then I began filling in the windows with all the glass that I had smelted. After bringing all the belongings inside my house, I had forgotten about this coin dragon. I placed it down and all of a sudden a mini dragon started flying around. I had no idea what it did. I could pick it back up again after. I tried to right click on it, but it did nothing. I wonder what this does. It was now time for me to begin hunting down the Reaper, and his castle was located in the Nether. So I made myself a diamond pickaxe and then began venturing down into the caves after collecting some food. These caves were massive. They looked super cool with all the lush biome next to them. Eventually, I think I found enough lava. I placed down some water and I began mining all the obsidian around it. I also mined enough for an enchantment table because eventually I was going to want to start enchanting my gear. I knew I was going to need a lot of food if I was going to fight the Reaper. He was one tough boss, but I had almost none. So I ran to the village next to me and began harvesting the melons. I wasn't excited to use melons for food, but when I right-clicked on one of the villagers, I noticed he traded bread. So I ran back to my base and I grabbed all the emeralds I could. I then returned and traded with him for the bread. This was definitely a great deal. I was able to get 60 pieces of bread. This was going to be way enough to be able to venture into the Nether. With everything ready, I gathered some final supplies and then I built the portal. The portal looked super cool. I jumped in, not knowing what was ahead. When I arrived in the Nether, I began to look around. This was strange. I had never seen a Nether like this. I quickly crafted some golden boots because I remembered the piglins like to attack you if you're not wearing gold. As I began to walk around, I started seeing all these weird creatures in the sky. All of a sudden, I was attacked by a flying toad. This thing just jumps in the air and yeets at you. And then, all of a sudden, a berserker came at me. This could only mean one thing. I was at a bastion. After killing the berserker, I made my way to the bastion and began maneuvering around it. I could hear something shooting at me, but I wasn't sure what it was. As I moved more around, I found more piglins that jumped to attack me, but I was able to kill them. I slowly made my way further and further down. This was getting crazy dangerous. I used my crossbow to be able to kill mobs from a distance. I didn't have strong enough armor yet to take on most of these guys, so I'd need to play it safe. One of them dropped the Axe of Rectitude, gifted to the strongless piglin brutes by the hidden piglin mogul. Give it to a piglin while holding a netherite scrap in your offhand to unlock mogul trades. This is very interesting, but I didn't have time to really go over this. I killed the last one, and then began looting all the chests inside. I had bigger fish to fry in this nether. I continued wandering, looking for the Reaper's stronghold. After some time, I found it. Nearby, though, I found a golem-like creature. I slowly approached it, but it didn't seem to be hostile, so I left it alone, as weird as it looked. I began wandering towards the giant castle, knowing full well that the doom that was inside. Out of nowhere, a piglin brute attacked me. I pillared up using the dirt I had brought, and I thought I was safe. But all of a sudden, he began breaking down the blocks below me. I quickly bridged over to the wall, but then all of a sudden, a gas started shooting at me. I barely made it to the tower. I looked around, and I figured out where I needed to go. I began shooting the mobs nearby with my crossbows, as meleeing them was a death wish. After killing some of the armored piglin, I made my way down. I opened the barrels and found more arrows inside. These were a lifesaver. I moved slowly on the walls, looking for more treasure to loot. I was quickly overrun with piglins, though, and brutes, who tried breaking my tower again. At the same time, someone was shooting at me with rockets. I thought this was for sure the end. I couldn't figure out where the rockets were coming from, so I built dirt all around me. I used my crossbows to take out all the guards below at a distance. After taking out the last one, I made my way down and looted their drops. I made my way down some stairs to the main entrance hall after that. I had to be sneaky, or else the whole fort would crash down on me. I spotted a guard high on the rafters, so I shot at him with my bow and brought him down. Once he was down, I quickly sprinted inside, and then all of a sudden a brute with an elytra sprinted at me. I went up the ladder as fast as possible, as fighting him would just attract more. On the next floor, I thought I was safe finally. Then all of a sudden, a piglin with a netherite sword barged through a doorway. In a small room at the top of the tower, I found a staff on a pedestal. This must spawn the Reaper in. After a deep breath, I was teleported to these flying islands, and I was dropped right at the center. And there, before me, was the Reaper. The battle began. I started by using my crossbow to try and keep him at a distance, but he wasn't having it. He would close in whenever he wanted, throwing his scythe at me. This was crazy. Okay, I have to try and keep my distance here. If I use my axe too much, he's gonna get too much damage on me. Use my crossbow for a bit, and then switch back to my axe at the end. These particles that seemed almost green kept being cast from his scythe. I had no idea what they were, but I had to keep juking them. If I was hit by them, I had no idea if I would instantly die or not. After what seemed like ages, I finally had him down low. I grabbed my axe, and then I charged in for the final attack. And after a few swings, I brought him down. I then found myself teleported to an island floating above a lava lake, and in front of me, a red chest. When I opened it, I found wither netherite armor inside. This was the Reaper's score. Whoever killed the Reaper would gain access to this completely overpowered armor. But it still wasn't powerful enough to take on the dragon. For that, I would need to face the next dungeon inside of the end. But for now, I had to worry about surviving and making it back home. So I grabbed the supplies and began adventuring home. I came across what seemed like a bastion remnant. When I went closer, piglins and brutes sprinted out at me. I began to attack them. I was able to kill them all. I then looted the bastion remnant, taking all the treasure inside. I even found a netherite scrap. This was OP. Eventually, I made it back home and started for my next quest. The next quest was to seek out the end, and inside, a dungeon that would unlock the final dragon I had seen at the start. But before heading there, I wanted to complete a few tasks. Specifically, I really wanted one of those dinosaurs. Ever since I first logged into the world and I saw one of those behemoth creatures, I thought to myself, that would be a cute pet. So I began clearing out an area to build a pen for it. I had no idea if I could tame it or ride it, but I was going to find out. I cleared out a pretty big spot by my home. I was going to build a pen here for the dinosaur, but also for some other unique creatures inside of this world. But I then realized I didn't have enough resources to build the pen. But before going in to collect them, I wanted to extend my farm a bit, so I made the wheat farm a little bit bigger. I was really excited to see for some reason how big I could make this farm throughout these 100 days. I decided to use the underground abandoned city as my way into the mines, so I went towards the village and then I climbed in. While I was down there, I met some more zombies, but I was able to take them out. I also found this weird beekeeping area. It seems like they were trying to keep life alive down here. This made me even more curious as to why the villagers had headed down in the first place, but I had a feeling I was going to find out a bit later. I looted the remnants of what was left with the chests, and then I headed into the mines. This pickaxe was really useful because it had an enchant on it called Vein Miner, although I had to be careful because sometimes I would mine out the blocks below me, and that could be a little bit dangerous. I found some diamonds pretty quick while I was mining, and then, a little bit later, I found a dungeon. But this wasn't a regular Minecraft dungeon, this was definitely a modded one. I was able to take out the skeletons, and then I looted the chest. I found a name tag inside, which was awesome because if I was able to trap one of those dinosaurs and perhaps ride him, now I could name him as well. After I finished mining, I made some new tools, and then I headed out into the forest to chop down some trees. I wanted to somewhat match the build with my house, but also put a new creative stint on it. But while I was mining, one of those wraiths came that shoot that blue fire that I'd seen right at the beginning. I killed them. It seemed like they were tracking me down more and more throughout these 100 days, but I wouldn't be distracted. I went back to my house and I began building. I was going to use a similar concept, but I was going to have more of a theme to it. This time, I wanted to use golden bars. These look super cool. I've never actually used a mod that's changed iron bars before, and these are just a really cool contrast. I used a similar design to the house, using the red pillars and then the blocks around it. I was going to construct one giant pen for the actual dinosaur, and then have mini pens next to it for the other animals. I'm sure they'd all love to be together, right? I then extended my wheat farm once even more after I completed my build. Again, I was pretty excited to see how big I could get this wheat farm. It would be really cool if it surrounded the entire lake. But now the daunting task came. Could I trap or tame one of these giant dinosaurs? I headed out into the wilderness, and after a little while, I found one. But getting him back to base was not going to be easy, as he didn't seem to be attracted to any type of food source. Except for me, that is. So if I could bait him back to the base, by pretending to be his meal, perhaps I could get there. The problem was he kept getting stuck in all the trees, and I had to mine out the trees to get him through. It was quite a tedious process, but eventually we got him back to the base. Now, this man is a chunky fellow, and he didn't exactly fit through my door. So I had to make a little bit of a retrofit to get him inside, and then I quickly blocked him up as I ran around. Perfect. Now that he was in, I was able to fix the damage I had done. I didn't like how the blocks looked because you really couldn't see the dinosaur inside, so I changed them out for some glass. This was super cool. I was looking up ways to try and tame him to see if I could ride him, as he would be a sick companion to have in the final battle against the dragon. But so far it didn't seem like there was any way to ride him, so for now, he was just going to sit in the cage. Inside of the giant pen, I then constructed 2 more spots. These were going to be for cows and sheep. I'm not quite sure why I wanted these, but you know, I figured you may as well. So I went out and I grabbed some. First I grabbed some sheep, luring them with some yummy wheat. I only had 1 piece, but I didn't tell them that. I got them back to the pen, and they were juked. I then went out and I collected some cattle as well. These guys were a little bit farther away, so it took a little bit of time to get them back. I knew I wanted food, not necessarily for me, but if I wanted to tame any dinosaurs in the future, I was going to require a lot of food to actually feed them, so I figured I should get this started now. Before heading into the end and completing my last quest to find the dragon, not the Ender Dragon, but the dragon that we saw at the beginning. You see, the Ender Dragon is just a stepping stone to what this behemoth of a dragon is. He's basically the one that would have created the Ender Dragon, and I have no idea if I'm going to be able to kill him. But by killing the Ender Dragon, I should be getting some loot that will help me. But before going there, I wanted to construct a bridge. The bridge was going to be from my house all the way to the village. This way, when I wanted to trade, I wouldn't have to swim across the water, and I really wanted to test my building skills. So I built a bridge connecting to a small island, and then from the small island, I built it all the way to the village. Before heading to the end to face my fate, I wanted to enchant my items, but I didn't have enough books. So after breeding my animals, I began an adventure to go out looking for some more books for my bookshelves. While I was out adventuring, I saw these massive mountains. You know, there's something always about mountains that just makes me want to build and like have bridging systems. Nope, we're not gonna do it. We're done. We're looking for books, but one day we're gonna do it. I then also found this little hut, and inside, some bookshelves. Not enough to make a full enchantment area, but definitely enough to get us started. And then, while adventuring, I saw probably one of the most epic structures I have ever seen. I have no idea what's in there. Probably a lot of books, but also probably a lot of things that want to kill me, and I don't have time right now to go in there. But dang, does that look cool. I saw a pirate ship next to me, and I figured that the captain's quarters probably had some bookshelves. So I made my way in through the bottom, and then began slaying the skeletons. This took forever. You see, I thought I broke the spawner, but it turns out I didn't. So after looting some of the barrels, I continuously killed the skeletons for what seemed like ages, until I realized that the spawner was actually still there. So I re-broke the spawner, but at that point there were so many skeletons that it was ridiculous. So I sprinted up the stairs, and with everybody shooting at me, I went right into the captain's quarters and shut the door. However, the captain was in there, so I had to duel it out with him. It was a pretty easy fight, considering the armor I had from killing the Reaper. Once I killed him, I took all the bookshelves, and then began making my way back home. I took one last look at the structure. I really wanted to go, but I knew I had to go home, so I headed back. I then carved out a little area by my house to put the enchant setup in. I'm always really bad with this, and I always just place the bookshelves wherever, and I wanted this one to look a little bit nice. After the setup was done, I began enchanting my items. Unfortunately, I couldn't enchant the super overpowered sword, but I could enchant a diamond sword, so for now that would be good enough. But hopefully when I killed the Ender Dragon, I would get some more powerful drops to face the final dragon. Now, there was only one thing left, collecting the remaining Ender Pearls to begin searching for the stronghold. So that night, with my looting 3 sword, I went out and I began killing all the Endermen I could find. I didn't know if this was a normal stronghold or not. I had suspicions that something was going to be off about it, as it was the last step to reach the final dragon after the Ender Dragon. But all I could do was get the pearls and go find out. The next morning, after I got all the Ender Pearls, I began gathering my last bit of gear. After selecting everything I wanted, I got a little bit more wheat to make some more bread. And then, I was ready. I began my adventure. Again, I didn't know if I was going to be able to survive this. I didn't have powerful enough armor, I thought, to face the Ender Dragon. Like I said, this is not a normal Ender Dragon. If he is the last step before protecting that final dragon, he's going to be more powerful. And although I was nervous, I knew my only shot was to try and take him. and eventually I found the stronghold. And just like I suspected, when I dropped in, this was no normal stronghold. I had my awareness up, just in case of traps or mobs that were waiting for me. It was a super cool design, and as I went through it, I found some iron. This was perfect, because I actually forgot to bring a bucket, and buckets are super useful when you go to fight the Ender Dragon. After searching through a little bit more, I found the portal room at the end of a long hallway. It was time. When I jumped through the portal, everything was just bright. After jumping through the portal, there I was, face to face with the dragon. But he was not the prize I was after. There was a more powerful beast waiting for me. But I could not underestimate the Ender Dragon. I began taking out all the healing crystals before engaging. I had to scale some of the obsidian pillars to break the healing crystals. After breaking my first one, I was forced to dive off for my life, but I saved myself with a water bucket. This happened again on the next pillar. After the pillars were destroyed, I gathered in the center and began taking him down. I swung as he roared. Then, all of a sudden, I was shot across the map and I landed on the edge of a block inches from the abyss. I regained my courage and rushed back in. And then, I brought him down. After collecting the egg, I looked around and then I found it. The final chest, containing the mythical armor to defeat Asgad, king of the demon dragons. I then took an ender pearl and made my way to the portal to the end cities. I had to locate a ruined portal frame to find Asgad so I could begin my search. While I was looking around, I noticed that nature was overtaking this realm just like the overworld. I found a fallen ship and inside some weird loot. While searching around, I found these cute flying creatures. They look like mini appas. I then almost fell off to my doom once again. I really need to tie my shoes better. I saw a giant end fortress in the distance, and a little later, beside it, a ruined portal. I went towards it, and I placed the egg on a pillar, and then all of a sudden, my screen went black. I found myself teleported to an old city. It seemed familiar, but all of a sudden, I heard the wails of the dragon. As I looked up and saw him in the sky, I began to fire. I then ran to a corner and tried applying a potion of night vision, but it didn't work. I was doomed to fight this beast in the dark. I continued to shoot at him until finally he landed. He nearly killed me, but my sword was too powerful now. After rushing in, I was able to finish him. With a great wail, he fell. Victory was mine. As I stared at his corpse, I began to remember Trilthia.